Yeah, let's do it. Let's build on this Vikings conversation because I think now that we're seeing the plan unfold, and that means that, earlier in the offseason, we weren't sure about Za'Darius and Dalvin and Daniil. Well, now we've seen Za'Darius get traded. We're possibly seeing Dalvin get traded or cut today, and Daniil is on the trade block. So all of these key pieces that we assumed maybe one or two would be gone, it looks like all of them might be gone, putting the Vikings closer to that rebuild mode that we talked about earlier. So how do you guys view Kwesi's offseason? I think it's been a curious one, right? Because he's clearing all of this cap space. He's cutting these veterans. He's opening up financial avenues for the future. And yet we've got this big glaring $28 million dead cap hit for Kirk Cousins next year, which just seems antithetical to the approach. I like the idea of clearing up cap space for the future. I like that, but it does get contradicted a bit by the quarterback situation. So I think that it's an odd kind of set of choices without knowing the full picture. I think Kwesi probably has a plan for down the road, how he's going to handle all this. But until we see that plan come to fruition, I'm just a little puzzled as to how he's approached it. I know it's tough. You can't make all the moves after you go 13-4. You can't tear it all down, obviously. But I wish he maybe just would have committed to one direction or the other. What do you guys think?
What you got, Reggie?
I think the problem is they have to field a competitive team because we've talked about it. The Wolves don't seem interested in a tank job. So tearing the whole thing down is not good for their bottom line because it doesn't put butts in seats. We kind of saw with Chicago last year, those fans were going through it and they didn't want to go to games, besides the fact that they have this whole stadium issue, but kind of doing the whole rebuild thing, like the full rebuild, is not going to work for the Wolves. But I think the problem with that is if you don't do the tank or you don't do the full rebuild, it's kind of hard to kind of get that next quarterback of the future that they seem to be kind of pushing towards. So it's okay, what do you do? How do you get there? And I think Luke mentioned the whole Daniil Hunter trade. It's that would be tough. That would be a brutal thing to do. But if you do that, then now you have a chance to maybe package a couple picks to move up to try to get the quarterback of the future. And now you kind of see the rebuild thing kind of take place where you're trying to still be competitive, but also look towards the future. His competitive rebuild phrase, strikes again. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how things play out through the rest of this offseason to see if maybe they do trade him or do they get an extension done with Daniil, because I think that kind of shows what their direction is and what their vision is. It's a little murky right now. It's not really easy to read.
Yeah, I think you got to look at Kwesi's moves, each one specifically in a vacuum, because they all have different intentions behind them. Thielen and Kendricks, for example, that was about clearing some overpriced contracts for aging vets who just were never going to be a part of the new long-term plan. Za'Darius, he was unhappy here for a few different reasons. He wanted to move on. Dalvin Cook, we know, didn't want to take the pay cut. Vikes wanted to move to a running back by committee like the rest of the league. And I think we all have to remember who Kwesi is at the end of the day. He's an analytical GM that makes moves solely off the numbers. And I know that's a big shift for fans coming from Rick Spielman in that era. He probably would have found a way to keep Dalvin around. He probably would have kept Thielen or Kendricks, probably would have given Kirk Cousins another 2-3 year extension too. But again, the focus of this new regime, it feels like through a season and a half now, right? 2 off seasons. It feels like it's all about keeping resources available for guys like JJ, Hawkinson, Darrison next season, and maybe most importantly, having the money available to make a long-term commitment to a quarterback, whether that's drafting a guy next year or continuing to pay Cousins year by year. And what do all those guys have in common, by the way? It's all offense. And look what they've done on offense this offseason, by the way. They had a top 10 offense last year. They brought back all 5 offensive linemen. They added another playmaking tight end. They swapped out Thielen's contract for a rookie deal with Jordan Addison. And they said, as much as we love Dalvin Cook, we think we can get the same type of production with this 4-man rotation. So they're tough moves to swallow, Ron. I get it, especially for the short term for these fans, but they're all to better the long-term health of the roster, I think. And looking around the league, understanding this is an offensive league now and a passing league specifically, first and foremost. And that's, I think, where their number one priority lies moving forward. And that's clearly what they want their identity to be during this KOC Kwesi era while they continue to clear cap space on the side.
Yeah, when I look at teams, I always think about boats. And every team is, what type of boat. The captain goes down with the ship. And so if you think about, here's a bunch of different boat opportunities. You have Titanic, which I hope Sam has seen that one. You also have Captain Phillips. You have Speed, for those that remember Sandra Bullock and Speed. She ended up on a boat too, wasn't just a bus. And then you have Fast and Furious. And I know a lot of you don't even know the Fast and Furious boat reference, but it was Fast and Furious 2 with Ludacris. It starts off with boats. Here's where I go with this. The type of boat that I feel like Kwesi is taking the Vikings on right now is a little bit of Captain Phillips. When you think about Kevin O'Connell stepping on the ship, Kevin O'Connell walks on the ship and I'm the captain now. But then what happens?
So he's the pirate?
He is the pirate. Kevin O'Connell is the pirate.
Right.
But here's where I go with that. He flips the script. He starts off as the pirate because he has to take over the boat, but then he becomes Tom Hanks. So he's both. He's the pirate and now he's Tom Hanks. So he's going to become the hero. And within that, people have to die. People have to go. Like, you got to move on from people. And I think that's the only way for this to be successful. And so a part of you, because again, when Kevin O'Connell took over, all these guys were a part of him. So he's the entire movie is him, but he has to kill a part of himself. And part of that for him and Kwesi, and him and Kwesi are one. Like, they're both Tom Hanks. They're both the pirate. They have to be able to look at this team and say, here's the pieces we got to kill off to be successful in the rest of this. They got to tell the snipers, like, look, hey, take the shot. And it sucks. Like, when we watch these players get sniped, it doesn't feel good. But it's part of the league. And we've seen so many teams, like, Bobby Wagner had to move on from his team and go to the Rams. Like, so many teams, fan bases that have been tied into these players. Marshawn Lynch had to leave the Seahawks. Like, I'm pretty sure all these other teams had the same feelings we're having about the Vikings when they lost their guy that they thought, or their guys that they thought would be on that team forever. It is what it is. Imagine, like, the Panthers when they lost Christian McCaffrey. It is what it is. It's just part of the league. And so I think for Kwesi's offseason, because I know that was part of it too, how would we kind of grade this offseason so far? What do we think of his moves? I think he's moving in the right direction. To Luke's point, the only way to get a guy like Caleb Williams or a serviceable quarterback that you think could be the future, I don't know if the serviceable quarterback is out there the next 2 or 3 years. That's the problem too. When you're a scout, and I'm pretty sure the scouts are saying this, like, it's going to be hard every year to get a CJ Stroud and a Bryce Young. Caleb Williams, I guess, is the next one. But do the Vikings have enough juice to get up there? Or are they willing to tank and get up there? Like, that's going to be the problem. I don't think the Vikings fans could deal with a Kirk Cousins winning 3 games. Kirk Cousins winning 3 games, the town might have a riot. Like, it might not go well at US Bank Stadium every week. It would be booze. It would be paper airplanes. It would be everything. Pets' heads would be falling off. Like, it would just be crazy. It'll be Animal House at the stadium.